Well, you guys, you asked and now I'm answering. Finally, we get a point of view theory video from the perspective of the Indominus Rex. My brother laughed. He and I have always been together. We were born together. And even though our little home was small, we were happy because we had one another. My name is Indy and my brother's name is Opson. I remember us being fed like clockwork. It was so rewarding and our life was fun. We snuggled up next to each other and told stories deep into the night. Of course, we were little babies, so everything we said was nonsense, but we had a world full of imagination. Every single day with Opson was an adventure. The creatures known as humans were always part of our family, but I didn't really understand the significance until I became older. As soon as I was born, I've seen these humans. As a matter of fact, I thought that they were my family, but they didn't look anything like my brother Opson. So I figured that when we got older, we would look just like them. We were in our own little area, but we could see the other creatures in the lab as well. Back then, I just thought it was my home, and that was the extent of the world that we lived in. But I was very wrong. "Indy, you want to see what I can do with my tail?" said Opson to me that morning. "Sure." Opson then held his tail high above his body and waved it back and forth. And to my amazement, it started to change colors. I was truly in awe. And I told him to keep showing off so that our family could see. He got their attention all right, and the humans all crowded around him excitedly. I was so proud of my brother, and he was enjoying all the attention. The other creatures in the lab, however, didn't look so happy. As a matter of fact, this made them very uneasy. Were they afraid of him? It didn't seem so. It looked more like they were afraid of the humans anytime they entered the room, and my brother started to show off with his tail. After a while, I told Opson to stop showing off so much because he was making the other creatures uncomfortable. At the time, I never considered that the creatures were ever part of our family because they always felt different. The humans, more so, were relatable to me because we were all intelligent. Later that day, some of the humans came back. A lot of them I recognized through their smells, even though they looked eerily similar wearing those outer skins. One of them picked up my brother and held him. This wasn't really an alien thing to me because this has been done to me several times. Not much, but it was usually something very important. When I was much younger, they did the same to me and they stuck me with something sharp. I was very angry and very scared when it happened, but then after I felt a lot better than I ever had, I realized that the humans, our family, was only doing what they did to protect us and to make us stronger. I started to question that the day when they took my brother out of the enclosure. I watched as they carried him to the other side of the lab. They never carried him away that far. They placed him upon this metal slab, and he just sat there trusting, knowing that whatever was happening was a reward for him being strong and beautiful. He looked at me and winked. I smiled uneasily. For some reason, I knew that something didn't seem right. Maybe it's because they were deviating from the behavior that they normally displayed, but it just made me feel very uneasy, and my suspense grew as he sat there and they started fumbling around with these different objects that I've never seen them use before. They stuck something inside my brother. "Don't worry, Indy, it doesn't hurt. I've done this before." "How are you feeling?" I asked him. When we were close together, we usually spoke with each other through our body language and expressions, but since he was farther away, he had to communicate by emitting chirps. A more covert way that we would communicate is by thumping or clicking. He wasn't able to thump because now they were holding down his legs. They stuck him a second, a third, and fourth time, and I could tell that he was nervous and starting to feel a lot of pain. But even through all of his pain, he still said this: "It's okay, Indy, I can handle this. I'm really strong, and I know they're doing this to make me stronger." I didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to say to him? I didn't believe him. This was not normal. After what seemed like forever, they finally stopped and put him into a weird container right to the side of where they had him previously. "See? It's all over. I told you." "How do you feel?" I asked frantically. "I don't know. I feel great. I mean, my legs are a little sore, but I feel great. I feel really energetic. This is awesome." I didn't want to tell him, but something about what was happening made me feel like I had to say it. "Opson? Yeah, what's up?" I miss you." "Indy, don't be ridiculous. I'm right here." "No, what I mean is, I don't know. I'm freaking out right now." Opson hesitated. I could tell that he was nervous too, but he always tried to make me feel better. It was weird because he was always the more optimistic one, even though he was slightly younger, and I felt as though I had to always protect him. But how was I supposed to do that from all the way over here? Hours passed by and I couldn't sleep. Opson was wide awake and energetic. He kept talking to me, but I wasn't hearing what he was saying. When the humans came back, they made a beeline for the container that housed Opson. He stood up cheerily, thinking that they were getting ready to take him out. They didn't. Instead, they stuck a weird thing through the hole in the container that I could see, and he stared at it, sniffing it. It was making a weird humming noise that I could detect all the way from over where I was. Something didn't feel right. Suddenly, there was a loud buzzing noise being emitted from that metal thing, and all I saw was my brother contort in a weird position and yell. He screamed in agony and terror as a long bolt of electricity surged through his body. His entire body started to change colors, just like his tail was prior. My roars were distressed as I saw what was happening to my brother. When they finally stopped, he looked at me confused and then looked at them, and I could tell what was going on through his mind. He was confused as to what was happening. He didn't know why they were doing this. These things, these humans that we thought were once our family, we trusted them. We thought that they were our parents. We thought that they cared about us. And now they were hurting my brother in front of me for no reason for which we could fathom. They stuck something else through the hole, and this time it was immense heat. I watched as pieces of my brother's skin burnt. I could smell his burning flesh from all the way over here. I shrieked, the loudest I ever have in my entire life. Of course, we were still very young, but what happened was so vivid I will never forget it. Opson! I pressed my face up against the glass and stared at him as he lay still. The humans took a break and went to the other side of the lab and mixed some concoction together. I saw my brother stir. He was lying on his side, and his stomach was the only thing that I could see facing me. His leg twitched, and then his face raised up, and he looked dead at me. Opson? Opson, are you okay? What he said next broke my heart, and that was the first time I've ever felt the emotion, hatred for the humans. He asked me, "What did I do wrong? Did I upset them?" No, Opson. I didn't know what else to say to him. Everything we have known prior to this was a complete lie. I guess in my head I always knew that something was suspicious about these humans that were posing as our family. I noticed how creatures that came in would always look sick and tortured, and there was always an air of panic and melancholy, but I ignored it. I even heard whispers on the winds from other creatures that would say something along the lines of, "Oh, this person was taken away, and this person is next." And I even heard whispers on the winds when we came in, and I could understand what they were saying, that we were gonna get the worst of it because we didn't look like them. You never really process things like that until a situation like this arises. I remember feeling a little bit uneasy every time they stared at my brother and me. The glare that they gave us was one of not adoration or fondness, but complete disconnect. The human snapped me out of my reverie as he went back towards my brother. He stuck him with something else in his leg. My brother this time shrieked in pain, his body already racked and sore from everything that's been happening to him in what seemed like only a few minutes. How could things seem to be happening so fast and so slow at the same time? I banged myself up against the glass, trying to create a diversion so they would leave my brother alone, if but just for a minute. 2 more humans came in, and I banged even harder. I roared, I clawed, I scratched the glass, my claws making a screeching noise unbearable to my own ears. This seemed to get their attention, and they came over towards me, seeing me scratch the glass. I could even see the indentations that my sharp claws were making on the glass ever so slightly. They opened my enclosure and did something to me. I don't know what it was, but it made me very tired. I refused to go to sleep, but before I knew it, I was out. And I knew I was out because I was waking up the next minute to see that my brother had disappeared. He was no longer in that little tank they put him in. I couldn't see him. What did they do with him? "Opson?" I called out. I looked beside me as I smelt something faint, and I realized that my brother was back in my enclosure with me. I ran over to him as he was curled up in the side. He looked awful. I tried to shake him awake, but he wouldn't wake up. He was breathing though, so I knew he was alive. I curled up next to him, my tail cradling his head. I licked him gently, sobbing. The mix of emotions that I felt were overwhelming. I felt sad, I felt helpless, I felt scared. I didn't know what to think. I didn't even know how to process what was going on. Suddenly, a voice rang out from a box that was in the corner of the lab. I've always known that something was in there, but my brother and I, for as long as we've been alive, which hasn't been that long, we've never seen what it was. However, it smelled sort of like me and my brother. He's not going to make it, the voice said to me with a sinister coo. What are you talking about? I asked the voice. You silly young thing, why do you think you're here? Why do you think all of us are here? We're merely experiments to these aliens. We mean nothing to them. The minute that you and your brother hatched into this world, your fates were already written in stone, tragically, may I add. I'd best not get connected to him too much. He won't last a few more days, and then they'll turn on you. I was in anguish by this time, and I yelled at the voice. How do you know? Are you with them? Do you know what's going to happen? Do you know why they're doing this? She chuckled, which really made me annoyed and terrified. Why would she be chuckling? Do I know what's going to happen? You have no idea how old I am, and I've lived to see this many times over, and it always ends up the same way, unless, of course, you're exactly what they're looking for. Like me, for example. My aggression and my prowess make me stand out from the rest. You think that they would kill me with my hysterics, but because I am the only one of my kind, they keep me around. Of course, this is not the ideal life that I would give myself, but an intelligent person bides their time. None of this made any sense to me. I had no idea what this creature looked like or what she was even talking about. But one thing was for sure, and I knew it now. The humans were not our friend. They were not even our family. Now that I know that something bad is going to happen to my brother, I started to devise a plan to get out of here. When the humans came in the next morning, I would attack them and then leap out, creating a diversion and give my brother time to get away. But thinking about a plan like that in your head and actually executing it are two different things. When the humans came by the next morning, they took my brother and tried to inject something into him again. This time I launched at their paw and I ripped into it, but this seemed to do nothing. I felt a punch in my face and I went sailing back into the other side of the glass. By the time I got back up, they were already taking their hands out of the enclosure and walking away. Opson? I looked at my brother. He opened his eyes and had a big smile on his face. Hey, I thought I'd never see you again. This confused me. He wasn't behaving as though he had just been tortured the day before. Opson, how are you feeling? I feel great. What do you mean? What do you mean, what do I mean? I asked him, now very angry. Those humans tortured you. Oh, you're so silly, Indy. They were just testing my strength. I know that now. Testing your strength by burning your skin and face off? Well, yeah. At that moment in time, I was more angry at my brother than I was at the humans. Opson, how can you say something like that? You felt what they put you through. I know that, Indy, he said as he stood up to face me. He then nuzzled me in my face. Do you think if they wanted to kill me, I'd still be here? What would be the reason to keep me alive? I didn't really have an answer for that because at the time I could not understand why anything would do that to something else. Why would you torture something just for the sake of doing it? To what end? It made no sense. And while I was expecting that dark voice to chime in once more, that was the last I ever heard of it. For days, everything seemed normal, and the only time the humans would come over to our enclosure was to inject something into my brother. He was feeling himself again, and in time, we, for the most part, forgot what happened. Until they came again, and I knew what they were coming for because I could see them coming straight for us, and I could see their body movement, and everything spelled to me that I was going to lose my brother. They reached into the enclosure, and I went on full attack mode. But before I could do anything, something was stuck into my body, and I started to feel really tired. I saw them lift Opson out of our enclosure and carry him back to that desk across the lab. This time, they put him through the same stress tests, but gave him even more. They shoved a sharp object down his throat, which caused him to cry and gurgle and bleed. They placed a weird, sharp-toothed, hairy creature inside an enclosure with him, and forced him to fight it. They made various large cuts and abrasions on his body and poured whatever that liquid was on top of him to make him cry. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take hearing his screams and seeing him in his throes of pain and panic. Whatever they stuck inside my body only made me tired, but it didn't make me fall asleep. I was helpless. I was helpless to say anything, but I could see and feel and hear everything that was going on. When everything got really bad, The thing that really broke me was when I heard my brother crying out my name, begging me to tell them to stop. I could hear laughter coming from inside that box. That sinister creature that warned me that this would happen was laughing. My brother kept screaming and screaming, and it just would not end. Maybe they let up for about 3 seconds before they were at it again, and it made me believe that he probably passed out from all the pain and anguish, and they woke him back up with the shots that they gave him, just to do it all over again. They stressed his body to the max, and honestly, when I couldn't take it anymore, I banged my head against my enclosure. I banged it so hard that I made myself unconscious. When I awoke, my brother again was beside me. This time he looked even worse. I cradled him again and I cried. I cried so much. The same routine happened every single day. And every time I got back my brother, he was worse off. I didn't know what to do. I overheard some of the creatures on one side of the lab consoling one another, as though they were going through the same thing. It sounded like a mother and a daughter, these very small green dinosaurs with sharp beaks. The mother said to her daughter that she had more control than she thought she did. "Indy," my brother said to me. I quickly looked down at him. Most of the skin on his body was either healing or missing altogether. "Yes, little brother." "Where do you want to go when you grow up?" "I don't know. I guess I want to go to that fire world that we created." First time we saw fire in the lab, we were always mesmerized by it, and we imagined that there was a world where the fire lived and bred with its own kind to make more fire. We imagined that the fire was good and happy, and that the fire would treat us like royals when we went there. So if there's any place I'd want to be, it'd be there. I looked down at him, and I said, "What about you?" Opson opened his eyes, barely able to keep them open, and said to me, "I want to go there with you." "Well, no one's stopping you," I said. "Indy." "Yes, Opson." I held him tighter with my tail, taking care not to hurt him. "I want to go there now." His whole body shivered as he said that. I was still very young, so I had no idea what he meant. What do you mean?" I think in that moment I knew exactly what he meant, but I didn't want to face it. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be what they want me to be. I failed. I'm sorry." I cried with my brother. "You didn't do anything wrong. What they're doing to you is horrible." "It's gonna keep on happening. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore." I watched as my little brother's body was racked with sobs until he finally went still. I sat up the whole night just staring through the glass ahead at the other side of the lab where they usually torture my brother. I stared for a very long time. I looked back down at my brother. I could feel the time that was steadily ebbing on by, knowing that in only a few moments the humans would be in here again to perform their ritual with my brother's body. I was thinking about what the green creature said to her daughter, about her having control. When my brother is being tortured, nothing I do can help him. And he doesn't want to do this anymore. I want to go there now. I can't do this anymore. I can't be what they want me to be. I failed. I'm sorry. It's gonna keep happening. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. Opson. I nuzzled my brother to try and wake him up one last time. His breathing was shallow. I'm unsure as to whether or not he could hear me in that moment. He was probably somewhere between being asleep and awake, but I told him anyway that he was going to go to the fire world, and he was going to be able to commune with the fire. He would become like the fire, eating everything, being one with everything, giving things life, and things respecting him in his beauty. As I licked his face and his neck, I found that my jaws remained stationary on his neck, open just wide enough to fit right over his neck. And then I squeezed, very gently at first, and then tighter. His body moved ever so slightly. When I squeezed tighter, I could hear him wheezing, trying to struggle to breathe. And then I remembered all the torture that he went through when they were torturing him and he was unable to breathe and they refused to stop. And in all my anger and my pain, my jaws squeezed even tighter and tighter and tighter. Indy! I heard him cry out, but I didn't want to listen. It's the only thing I could have done. It's the only thing I could do to help him. I could feel his tiny claws and legs kicking at my body, but I refused to listen. I became the humans. I became them. I tortured my brother for the last time so that they wouldn't for the rest of his life. Just like the humans, he trusted me. And he was still. No more air was being pushed from his nose. His little body was no longer rising and falling in a deep slumber, indicative of him breathing shallowly. It became cold. His eyes were open. His mouth was slack, staring at nothing. I didn't even get to say goodbye. How do you possibly say goodbye to someone who is the other half of you? I lay down beside Opson's body, trying to keep him warm. But no matter how much I lay beside him and how much my body enveloped his, he just became colder and colder until I couldn't bear it anymore and I pushed him away and lay on the far side of my enclosure. I looked at his body for a while and I knew what those humans were going to do. I've seen them do it with other creatures and I just ignored because I always thought those creatures were less than me. Even in death, they were going to try and torture him, to bring him back and to make him feel pain somehow. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. So, before the humans came in, only minutes after, I went over to my brother's body. I placed my jaws over his beautiful, now still and lifeless neck, and I began pulling the flesh from his bones. Don't worry, Opson, I'll protect you. I'll put you inside me so they'll never hurt you ever again. I promise.